Lobbying 101, How to Influence Laws and Policies. Tonight, we are joined by Jonathan Greenberg, who's on the ECC board as well, but Naomi Pena and I will be facilitating this workshop. So, to get us started, please put your name and pronouns in the chat. And the icebreaker question also to put in the chat is, which community school district do you live in? Or you can put down the district you work in or the district for which you are serving on a community education council, whichever district you identify with. Please put it in the chat so we have a record of your being here, but also we know which area of the city you are from. And while you all are doing that, let's get us started. So today's workshop is going to cover, well, we're doing the welcome and introduction, but we'll give you a quick session goals and overview so that you'll have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to walk you through how bills become laws, and I'll tell you what a bill is. And then we're going to go into how to lobby step by step. And we'll share some legislative issues that the ECC is working on for this spring, 2024. And at the end, pending time availability, which I hope we have time, we're going to do some quick role play so that you get used to talking to elected officials. So quickly, what is lobbying? It is an attempt to influence government decision-making. That's like the simplest, easiest definition. It's an attempt to influence government decision-making. Okay, that's simple enough. So today we're going to be talking about New York State. There is lobbying you can do with the city council or the federal level with Congress and US Senate. But today's session is going to be focused on New York State legislature, because that is actually the critical issue at the moment right now in terms of funding and a couple other education related initiatives and policies. So that's going to be our focus today. We're going to try to understand the lobbying steps that are more of the best practices. It's not like there is a very clear guidance on this is what you have to do, but these are the generally practiced lobbying steps that we're going to be sharing with you. And hopefully you'll be ready to participate in this legislative process. That's really our hope, that we empower you enough for you to feel comfortable reaching out to your legislators. Okay, so the New York State is made up of two houses. That's the New York State Assembly and New York State Senate. And then we have the governor. This is our legislative branch, right? And then the governor is the executive branch, just like the, what you learned in 8th grade social studies or 7th grade social studies, the division of power. So anyway, we have the legislative branch, which is the Assembly and Senate, and the executive branch, which is the governor. And all three entities have to work together to create laws. Assembly and Senate both have standing committees. These are committees that always exist. An education committee is a standing committee, which means education committee is always a committee. It's not something that they create and dismantle. And why we focus on New York State legislature? Well, first of all, New York State education law is a state law. And that's the law that has specifics on school governance. That means the Board of Education, which we now call as Panel for Educational Policy, or PEP, that lives in the state education law. Community education councils and citywide councils, those are also created in the state education law. So any changes we want to make, we have to work with the state legislature. Charter schools are also in the state education law, as well as school leadership teams. We also get a lot of money from the state in our state New York City education budget. So making sure that the state education budget is adequate and sufficient is an important issue for us at the state level. The state legislature is only in session from January to June. So these legislators essentially work half-time, January through June, but those are the 6 months period when everything has to get done, which makes everything a little bit challenging in terms of how we can lobby and get things done. So here's a slide that has links to how you can find who your assembly member and senators are. You don't actually have to take any notes because I'm going to be sharing the slides with you tomorrow, so you can get all the links, but I will also put them in the chat right now if you want to look up who your assembly member or senators are. You can use any of these links. I actually like using Who Represents Me NYC because it gives you New York City Council as well as New York State Assembly, Senate, and congressional representatives as well. It's a one-stop shop for all your elected officials. But you can also look up the Assembly website and Senate website separately. So quickly, how a bill becomes law. So step one, it really starts with an idea. And this idea could be generated by the assembly member, it could be generated by the senator, or it could be generated by a lobbyist or industry interest, or you, or we as collective parents. So you have an idea for a law that you want to push forward. An idea then becomes a bill. Bill is this document that says this is what the law is going to be like, but it's before it becomes a law, it's called a bill. Okay. So there's a bill drafting stage, which is a very technical thing that legislators have to do. It's all legalese. If you ever look at the New York State education law that governs New York City school governance, it is actually quite poorly written, in my opinion, but it's a very specific way of writing. That's not the way you and I talk. So a bill gets drafted, an idea gets drafted into a bill, and then the bill has to be introduced. And it doesn't go straight to the entirety of the New York State Assembly or New York State Senate. It first has to be introduced into a committee. And for most of the bills that we are interested in moving forward with, they'll end up in the education committee, except we are actually pushing for changes to the open meetings law, which is probably going to go under a different committee. But the point is, you have a bill, it needs to be introduced in the committee that's appropriate for that bill. And then the committee has to take an action. And after the committee takes an action and votes to approve that bill, then it becomes something that the whole oops, sorry, I shouldn't have gone that fast. Step 5 is when the legislature, the whole assembly votes on the bill. And the same thing has to happen on the Senate side as well. And when both the Senate and the Assembly vote on the same bill, it gets forwarded to the governor for her signature. When the governor signs the bill, then it becomes the law. So there are all these steps. And one of the reasons we're showing you this is because there are several different places where you can exert your influence or you can lobby. Okay, so let's take you through. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I will try to pay attention to what's coming up in the chat. Step 1, again, an idea. Ideas for legislation come from many sources. A senator may have an idea, one of his or her constituent may point out a need. That means you can go to your senator and say, hey, I have an idea for a new law, right? That can become a bill. A state official, like commissioner of the state education department, may propose a change to the law or propose a new law. Or it's not in the education arena, but it could be like Physicians Association, a group of doctors might actually suggest a change to a law, right? That's like an organization may espouse a cause This is actually cut and paste from a website, which is why this word espouse is used. That's not a word I usually use. But anyway, an organization may espouse a cause that requires a change in the law. So the Physicians Association or the UFT probably does a lot of this too. There's no monopoly on ideas for legislation. That's sort of a sunny idea, but I'm not, it's not like I can call up my assembly member and say, hey, Deborah, I need a law. And then she will go ahead and move with it. So it's a little bit harder than, there's no monopoly, but the idea is there are ways you can actually push for changes to the law or new law, working with a collective of people. They don't always have to come from legislators themselves. Step 2 is the bill drafting stage. Once an idea for a new law has been settled on, it must be put into bill form before it can be considered by the Senate. This is using the language Senate because this is actually cut and paste from the Senate website. But it's also true for the Assembly as well, right? Considered by the Senate and the Assembly. The actual drafting of legislation requires a specialized type of legal training and is usually done by the staff of the Legislative Bill Drafting Commission. So the Senate has its own group of people, staff people, whose job it is to draft bills because it is technical. Even though I have seen colleagues in my day job who are not bill drafters, but are able to craft language around a bill. It's not impossible for somebody who's got enough experience working with bills to draft a bill, but it's usually a good idea to get a professional to draft it. Step 3 is the introduction stage. So once an idea for a new law has been settled on, it must be put in. Oh, this is not the right language. Sorry about that. What happened? There's something a little weird. So, okay, the bill needs to be introduced into the committee, and the standing committees evaluate bills and decide whether to report them. That means send them to the Senate floor for final decision by the full Senate. So once a bill is introduced, then it gets introduced into the committee. The committee has discussion. Sometimes they even have hearings, and then the committee makes a decision, takes a vote to see if they want to actually move it out of the committee into the Senate floor. A lot of times committees just vote it down and then the bill is sort of dead in the committee. So committees often hold public hearings on bills to gather the widest possible range of opinion, but this is not always true. And after consideration, the committee may report the bill to the full Senate for consideration. It may amend the bill or it may reject it, or it may pass the bill as is. So there are all these different things can happen. So while a bill is in the committee is a time when parent leaders can actually exert influence. So this is a good place to remember. You can reach out to committee members who are considering a bill and say, yes, please support this bill. Or you can say, no, you can't pass this bill. Or you can say, I like the bill, but these are the changes I need you to make. So this is definitely a good place to lobby when the bill is in the committee. Step 5 is the legislative action or the calendar. The committee refers the bill to the calendar. This is technical language. You don't really have to understand fully because I don't fully understand all this language. What it means is that the committee took an action and then the bill is out of the committee because it voted to move it forward to the entire rest of the Senate or Assembly. It may be amended or it may just be as it is. So it comes out of the committee and the committee refers a bill to the calendar to be placed on this session calendar. This is just one of the technical things that has to happen. It has to be put on the calendar for the entire Senate to vote on. The bill must be read once a day for 3 days before vote can be taken. Again, this is sort of those obscure things that's in the law somewhere. So this has to happen, which means there is this period of 3 days between the time when the bill comes out of the committee until the rest of the Assembly or the Senate can take a vote on that bill. It's called aging or something. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, but there's this 3-day window of period when nothing happens to the bill out of the committee before the rest of them can vote. After the third reading, a bill comes up for consideration and it's debated, discussed, and explained. And this is the entire Senate or the entire Assembly. If a majority of the Assembly or the Senate approves, then the bill is sent. Oh, this is from the Senate version. Okay. So if the majority of the Senate approves, then the bill is sent to the House. If the majority of the House approves, I think the same thing happens, right? The two houses actually have to, at one point, come together to make sure that they have the same bill. Covering a lot of stuff. Any questions, put it in the chat. Or actually, you know what? Let me just do this. You can also unmute yourself with questions. Okay. So legislative action, passing the actual bill. If a majority of senators approve the bill, it goes to the Assembly. Again, that's with the last part of the slide. If Assembly passes it first, then it goes to the Senate. So both houses definitely have to communicate and coordinate. If one house passes an amended bill, the bill must go to the other house to reconcile any differences. This is where things get a little bit tricky. If the difference in the bills between the two houses are significant, then a conference committee may need to be formed. So a bill might be amended in the committee in one house, but the other house doesn't amend the bill. The bill comes out of both committees in both houses, and then both houses vote on it, but then there are these amendments in the one version of the bill. The other house has to agree to the amendments and make the change, but if the changes are significant, right, then the two houses actually have to come together to reconcile the difference. So let's say, for the sake of an argument, Assembly has a bill to extend mayoral control by 10 years. And it comes out of the committee and the Assembly votes to approve a 10-year extension. Senate had a bill, the same bill, but then the Senate committee says, oh, no, we're just going to give him 2 years, not 10 years. Comes out of the committee and the Senate votes to approve a 2-year extension. So then you have these two bills that have pretty significant difference. 10-year extension in one house, 2-year extension in the other. They'll have to come together to reconcile the difference. Okay, so suppose the two houses actually agree on the same bill and they come out of the committees and come out of the both houses with approval. Then it gets sent to the governor with her signature. So the governor has 10 days, not counting Sundays, to sign or veto the bill passed by both houses if the legislature is in session. So remember, the legislature is in session from January to June, right? And they usually actually out by mid-June. This year, I think they're done on June 8th or something, very early. So if they're still in session, then the governor has to sign within 10 days or veto the bill within that 10-day window. 10 days is counted from the time the bill is delivered to her, not 10 days since both houses pass it. This is very tricky. There are a whole bunch of bills that passed in June last year before the session ended, but somehow those bills that passed both houses weren't delivered to the governor until like November. So then the clock started ticking since the day the governor received the voted on bill, not when the legislature actually voted on them before they went on recess in mid-June. So this is actually kind of tricky sometimes because legislatures usually get really busy after they pass the budget. The budget needs to be passed by March 31st. So right now they're just negotiating budget stuff. After the budget passes is when they start taking up a lot of issues that are not related to the state budget, but there are so many different bills that they're working on. Sometimes they're passing and voting on bills like the second to the last day of the session. When that happens, if that bill isn't delivered right away to the governor for signature, then it may take a long time for her to sign it. And then it takes a long time for that bill to actually become law, even if two houses pass the bill. All these little quirky stuff. If the governor has the bill on the desk, the bill that passed both houses on her desk, but doesn't take any action, neither signs it nor vetoes it, then the bill actually becomes law. But again, the bill has to be on her desk, physically on her desk, not just past both houses. A vetoed bill goes back to the House that passed it first. So if the Senate passed it first, it goes back to the Senate. If the Assembly passed it first, it goes back to the Assembly. And if 2/3 of the members of each House vote to approve the bill, that's the supermajority, then a veto is overridden. So governor can say, no, I don't like this law, I'm just going to veto it. And it gets sent back to the Senate and the Assembly. But if both houses pass with a supermajority, then the governor cannot veto it again. It becomes law. Okay, as bills become laws, they're assigned chapter numbers for the particular session in which they were enacted, which is also very confusing because they also go into sections under each law. So oftentimes when we work on state education law for New York City stuff, it actually shows up under New York State education law, article yada, 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 title yada, 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 and all that section. But it also gets recorded as chapter 17 of the laws of 2020. So you just have to remember there are these different ways of identifying laws, but I always just go straight to the actual law on the Senate website to look up changes to the law. Okay, just want to pause here. We covered a lot of stuff. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Feel free to share. So I forgot to mention, while the bill's in the committee, that's a point of lobbying, right? You can influence your legislators in the committee. Once a bill comes out of the committee, then you start to lobby everybody else in that house, because then it becomes everybody else who's going to vote on that. Everybody else meaning all the assembly members and all the senators, right? Once it's out of the committee, then you start to hit all the members outside of the committee to lobby. And then I think there are times when you can actually lobby the governor, even after two houses, actually, when the two houses pass the same bill and the bill gets on the governor's desk, that is another point of lobbying. You can exert influence. You can write to the governor and ask her to veto it or sign it into law, right? Those are two options that you can actually exert your influence on. So the point of this bill process, or the how bill becomes a law process, is to understand that there are multiple points along the process where we can be lobbying. Okay, Naomi, it's your turn.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Naomi Pena. I am a long time member, parent member. I was on CUC1 for a really long time, 8 years. I was present for 5 of those years. And honestly, the roots that I started with aren't in education. They started in housing, but I was a community activist in that space too. So by literally way of practice and necessity, I literally had to learn how to do this work to get things done in my community. So I'm happy that everyone's here. I know this is a lot to digest. So definitely as you get questions, please put them in the chat. so Chino and I can make sure to get to them. So the first thing Chino, thank you for introducing how bills get made. I keep thinking about the Schoolhouse Rock video. um, but the key piece to this is also how to lobby. You just can't show up and be like, sign that bill. You know, you need to have a tact, an approach, an elevator pitch. So this is all ways that we can do that. There's various ways that you can lobby. You can do it by traditional phone calls. So if there's a bill that you are really passionate about or something that you really care about, you can do a phone banking campaign where you send people scripts. You send them sort of the number of their elected official, or you can by way of the website. Um,
That's a different match. This is a
ooh,
different match.
let me mute. You can find who your elected official is, and you can get people to rally around a cause or a bill. You can do emails. This was a really great tact during the pandemic when folks were trying to lobby around the city budget. I remember there was this really great link that I saw on social media that you click on it and it immediately populated the email, everyone's address, and all you had to do was hit send. It was beautiful. So there's ways to really do this well. You can actually visit your state elected official's office in the district. Every state elected official has 2 offices, one in Albany and one in the home district. You can also go to Albany. There's tons of lobby day. You can also do a Zoom call and you can invite your elected official to join. And there's also social media. There's no other place of really bringing people together than social media, or apart, whichever side you're on. You first need to do your research. You need to find out before you start making phone calls if the bill is out of committee, if the bill has been assigned a number, who are the co-signers of the bill, who is missing, because that way it can get you sort of a list of names. It doesn't make any effort to really call someone to support a bill that's already a co-sponsor. You're wasting energy on something that's already happened. So it's a good way to look at who's missing, who's supporting it, and also to have those details on the bill, because the elected official is going to ask who's on the bill, what's the bill number, so they can do their due diligence with their own staff and do, speak to the co-signers or the author, or just they want to sign on to it. It literally, one time there was a bill that I told one of my elected officials about it. She was like, what's the number? And literally within 10 minutes, she was like, done, I signed it. She was a co-sponsor. So it's if it's something that's easy and doable, it's always it's that easy. Next is to develop a really clear message. This is where the elevator pitch comes in. You need to be able to articulate and state why this cause is really meaningful to you, why this bill or the draft of a bill would be ideal for yourself, for your families, for the community, for the state. And you need to articulate that in a very concise way because they often are on the go. So creating these talking points not only help you articulate the message, but also helps the elected official articulate the message moving forward to his staff, or the woman, her staff, and also for other co-sponsors for the bill that they encounter. One key thing here that's massively important is personal stories. I will tell you that all the years that I've done this, the minute you share your personal story and why this matters, either they share a similar story, if it's not them personally, through their family, through their friends, or they know someone that has a similar story. And that actually makes advocating for causes really easy and a less of a lift. Next. Also be prepared to have information at hand. Whenever I am in the spaces that I know I'm going to have elected officials, I literally have a folder that has all my handouts ready to go, stapled, paper clipped, whatever, with my card. So that way If they walk away and don't ever remember what I said, they have it tangible in their hands and they have a card to reach me. I often always say, also see if you can get someone's contact information so you can do the follow-up. But it's really important to have these handouts with you so they can refer to it, they can then share it with their staff, and they can do their due diligence. Next. You should always try to schedule a visit. If it's not virtually, at least in person with the staff, ideally with them or with the staff, you know, if they can't be available. So that way you can make sure that they've reviewed it, they have questions. You know, if they're interested in drafting something, they may ask you, hey, you know, I'm thinking about these ideas. Do you think it aligns with what your cause is? One thing to understand is, like I said before, there's 2 offices, one in the district and one in Albany. If you have an office in Albany and you want to take a trip up there, it's a, you know, it's a day trip, so you got to plan. You got to call ahead and make sure that they have time to see you. They're normally in session Monday to Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, and as the budget deadline approaches, which is we're approaching that deadline at the end of March, they tend to be there longer. They leave, they're supposed to leave their district, Albany, to come to their district on Fridays, but it all depends on what's going up in Albany. So definitely you need to call ahead, make an appointment, and make sure you give yourself enough time, because the halls of the Capitol are massive and it's going to take you a solid 45 minutes from the time you get to the front of the building to you find, you know, but after security and you find your way down the halls to get to their office. And, you know, a quick shout out, you know, I don't like using materials that belong to other people without giving their proper shout out. Definitely look at the AQE's website. They have amazing content. Admittedly, a lot of the stuff is coming from AQE, and we have used their toolkit to repurpose for families. So definitely go to their website. That's the link, so you can review more. Next slide. And prepare for your visit. If you want to gather a group of people to these visits, it's ideal. Typically, elected officials do not like to meet people unless they are in their district. So if you want to approach an elected official that you personally don't live in their district but have a friend that does, it would be in your best interest to make sure that you bring that person with them so it can be honored as a constituent visit and you both can advocate for said cause. Definitely plan out your message. This will be longer than a elevator pitch. This will be a strategic conversation. I would say plan no more than 15 minutes to speak. So then you, for a half an hour meeting with 15 minutes you of speaking, and having them speak for another 15 minutes with Q&A. That way, you're not taking up too much time, but you need to be super targeted. You cannot go on tangents and tell a story, you know, forever. It has to be super targeted. Their time is ticking and you want to make use of their time. You also have to agree, if you're going with a group, of who's going to take what position in speaking. Maybe someone leads with a personal story. Maybe someone explains why this bill is really important, and someone else says what actions can be done immediately to get that bill crafted or supported. Next. Once your visit happens, like I said, make sure you're on topic, but then also make sure before you leave your meeting that you have a follow-up. So typically they'll bring a staff member. If you're in the position that happens often, you think you're meeting with an elected official and a staffer comes in, make sure you still, you know, respect them, have the meeting, but say, I really would like to follow up directly with the elected official. I would like a follow-up meeting. So that way, they understand that you will continue to have those conversations, and make sure you get everyone's information. And this is sort of the logistical stuff that I had mentioned before. these things, getting in the building is a pain. It's the halls are massive. It feels like you keep walking and you keep going nowhere. So just plan for a lot of walking. So, tip is to wear comfortable sneakers as well. Next. And the follow-up, like I mentioned before, definitely sort of best practices is to, send a thank you note, email, just letting them know thank you for your meeting, looking forward to touching base, and give them a couple of weeks. And if you don't hear anything, so if your goal is to have a bill by the end of session, honestly, January through March is the window to have that done, because of the rest of the session through June is really budget revisions and sort of last minute bills that are going to get approved. So, if you don't hear anything, you should definitely start following up. And, maybe they'll tell you the session is not going to work out, but we can use the rest of the year to really plan that out for the following session. So you can develop a strategic target plan with the office. Next. And this is the AQE toolkit. Like I said, it's amazing, chock full of information, but definitely a resource that it's used because they created it, because they do this work really well, but also it's very informative for others. So I wanted to again give that plug to them, because they do great work.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to share a couple legislative issues that the ECC is working on. By the way, the AQE links are in the chat. So, and I think you all can save the chat, but I'll also be sending it out tomorrow with the PowerPoint, so you don't have to copy. State budget is what we're in right now. Yeah, again, this needs to be voted on by March 31st. Even though I am hearing from certain folks up in Albany that the budget is going to be late again this year. It was late last year. It took until mid-April to pass. I don't know if the governor wants to be known as the governor who is late with the budget, but it's possible. So we are fighting the state budget issues, and I'll tell you what that actually means. Mayoral control is also an issue that we are fighting against. And I'll tell you a little bit more on that too. Charter schools always an issue. There is a bill out there that we are opposing, and I'll talk about that. And literacy, there's a whole bunch that Naomi can fill you in on. So the state budget, again, must be passed by March 31st, because the new fiscal year for the state starts on April 1st. Governor is allowed to include non-budget related bills as part of the budget. This is something that really drives me crazy, because what she does then is sticking in the extension of mayoral control by 4 years. That's attached to her budget proposal, the budget bill, even though mayoral control extension has absolutely nothing to do with state budgets. And I'm sure there are a whole bunch of other bills that are, housing related, social services, whatever else, that are attached to the budget bill, even though they're not budget issues. So we are asking the governor and the legislature to fix the budget immediately. This is a really big advocacy push right now because of this time constraints with the budget. And if you think about how legislators vote, they're not going to vote against the entire budget because of one little bill that's attached to the budget, right? It's unlikely that the majority of the state assembly or the Senate will vote down the state budget proposal because there's this extension of mayoral control attached to the budget. Especially outside of New York City, they don't care. So it is really, really important that we ask that to be removed, which actually is the next slide after this one. So the state budget right now, the actual budget issues, we have the advocacy points as well, because the foundation aid formula was tweaked by the governor, and that ended up sending hundreds of millions of dollars less to New York City. So we are asking the governor and the state legislature to stick with the existing current foundation aid formula. Foundation aid is the biggest pot of money that New York City receives from the state. It pays for fair student funding and a whole bunch of other things that we need to run our schools. So we're asking the governor and the legislature to restore foundation aid and using the current formula so that we don't end up losing money in the foundation aid line. We are also asking the state to fund critical programs that are started with funding from the federal COVID funds. We knew this was coming, right? When the federal government said we're going to dish out these billions of dollars to local school districts, including New York City, to address all the traumatic experiences that our children and parents and teachers and administrators experienced. So there was billions of dollars of infusion coming into the school system. And the DOE knew this money wasn't going to last forever, but they ended up using it to hire social workers, school psychologists, school counselors, starting pre-K, 3K, and bumping up a lot of the special education services, like pre-K special education was funded by this, restorative justice initiatives, all these incredible programs that our children needed got funded with this federal COVID money. Now that federal COVID money is expiring because there was a time limit and a dollar amount that was finite, we are asking the state to pick up the bill. Maybe not the whole thing, but we have some really, really important initiatives funded from this COVID money that really should continue for the sake of our kids. Again, removing mayoral control out of the budget, it has nothing to do with the state budget. It needs to be debated separately. So that's one of the things we're asking for. And we're also asking the governor and the state legislatures to allow New York City to receive what's called transitional aid. And I have a separate slide, so I will explain that separately. So the issue with mayoral control, we definitely want it out of the budget. Again, has nothing to do with the budget. But we also want to create an inclusive and participatory process for developing an alternative governance system. The ECC has been officially against mayoral control for many, many years, but we haven't been able to develop an alternative because doing so is really labor intensive, right? So we've been actually applying for grants to see if we can get some grant money to supplement the work that we started doing, really bringing people together to start brainstorm what the alternative to mayoral control might look like. But we also want the state to think about creating a process where we really bring everybody together and think about ideas for an alternative governance system. So we are asking for that process. And in the meantime, because that process will take a long time and we don't have an alternative system to replace mayoral control right now, we will be asking for some short-term modifications. One of the most important one being make the mayoral appointees on the PIP a minority member, right? Right now, the mayor has the majority members on the PIP as his appointees, but we want those members to be the minority members so that not everything is going to be rubber stamped. So the charter school issues. School districts in New York State that have charter schools receive what's called transitional aid, which is funding that's tied to increases in charter student enrollment year to year. So let's say Buffalo School District has 2,000 students in charter schools this school year, but next school year, Buffalo School District is going to have 3,000 students in charter schools. Now, Buffalo School District has to pay tuition for 3,000 students next school year in charter schools. But the state has this thing called transitional aid that actually helps Buffalo pay for the increase of 1,000 students who are going to start charter school next year. So it is funding to help school districts from the impact of increases in charter school enrollment. Now, in the state law, under the charter schools, New York City is explicitly accepted, meaning excluded from receiving this aid. There is a section that says school district with 1 million residents or more, and there's only one school district with 1 million residents or more, or cities with 1 million residents or more, actually, I think is the language. That's New York City, is not entitled or eligible to receive this aid. So we believe that's unfair. Other school districts are receiving this transitional aid every time there is a charter school enrollment increase. We are not. And over the life of this transitional aid in the state law, since we've started charter schools in New York City, this funding cumulatively could have given New York City more than $2 billion. Right? It's not every year we're going to get $2 billion, but over the years, the charter school population has been increasing in New York City. And if every year, if we receive transitional aid for the number of students in increased enrollment, cumulatively over a decade or more, it would have added up to more than $2 billion that our students got shorted. And I think every year it's about $100 million that we're losing out in transitional aid. In some years, it's actually more like $200 million that we're losing out on transitional aid because we're prevented from receiving this. We also want to eliminate the requirement that New York City has to pay for the rent for charter schools in private facilities. We are the only school district in the whole nation where we have to pay for private facility rent for charter schools that want to be in the private facilities. Nobody else in the country has to pay for their rent, but we do. And there's a bill actually that it's going to make this payment retroactive, giving charter schools even more money. So we're going to be doing some campaign on that front as well. So we have a toolkit that we created. I just want to share this with you quickly. Let me just stop sharing for a minute. And, oops, sorry, I'm being a little clumsy. Oops, hold on. I'm going to share a screen again. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so that tiny URL will take you to this advocacy toolkit website that the ECC created. It tells you what we are advocating for up until the state budget. So this is for the next month, for the month of March. This is what we're focused on. And then we'll have another set of priorities post the budget work that the state is doing. So it tells you what the issues are, what we want, and that's all on this page. And if you go to take action, you will have these actions that you can take depending on your comfort level. If you want to find your representatives, you click on this. If you want to call your legislators, then you can click here and it takes you a document with a cheat sheet. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So it takes you to a script that you can use. Here's an example. You can feel free to add your own personal story. Like Naomi said, it's really important. You can use this script and plug in the name of the person you're calling, whether it's assembly member, senator, or the governor's office. If you are not comfortable speaking to a live person, you can call at night. They have answering machines, voicemail, answering machines, such an old term, voicemails that you can leave a message. Make sure to state your name and where you're calling from. You can say, I'm a parent in Community School District 20 or whatever it is. Or you can say, I'm a parent of a child attending PS 123 in Brooklyn. And then you can say what you want to say and leave a voicemail message. You can certainly do that. So if you want to send an email, you can also click here and it takes you to the part of the document that says sample emails. You can cut and paste and send an email to the elected officials. This one is addressed to the governor, but you can also address it to assembly member, senator. You can make a bullet list of things you want. You can edit this however you want. So the toolkits are here, and I hope that you will actually be using the toolkit so that you can actually contact all the people. So we are actually going to do role play. Okay. Please take a screenshot of the QR code and give us your feedback. That would be great, but I will also put the link in the chat. Okay. Thank you everybody for showing up and sharing your time with us. Really appreciate seeing all of you here. You'll be getting links from us. The recording will take a little bit of time, but you will definitely have the slide deck and the links. So hopefully you feel ready to start calling and making appointments with your elected officials.
And we look forward to hear all the bills that you guys passed.
Yes.